Hey, what is going on, everybody out there? This is Jakejames Lugo. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to a brand new episode of Definitive Discussion Rebooted, my talk show podcast where I bring on phenomenal individuals from all over the place, the various corners of the internet and the games industry. We bring them on the show to come talk about some stuff. We deep dive into a whole bunch of different things. If you haven't already, I highly suggest that you guys check out the playlist that we have of all the different episodes of Definitive Discussion that are on the YouTube channel right now, as well as also make sure you join the Patreon. Remember, for $1, you're going to get all those exclusive episodes of EX Mode, which are cool supplements to the Definitive Discussion. There's a lot of content out there, a lot of great guests, a lot of cool things that we've dived into already. But today is going to be a fun one because we're talking anime stuff. Okay, I got Kate Sanchez, co-founder and editor-in-chief of But Why Though, and she also does a lot of podcasting stuff as well. She does a lot of content all over the place. Even today, she was busy. It's like, listen, all of a sudden my whole schedule just got filled up. I was like, well, I guess that's what happens when you're editor-in-chief. But Kate, welcome. What's going on? How you doing overall? What's good?
I'm doing good. I mean, since the topic is anime, my main thing is I want to know when I'm gonna get a haiku video game, because I just binged all of that series. Really? So I do a lot of podcasts. I have an anime podcast, pop culture podcast, but anime is my heart and soul, and it has been. I was a wee little weeb.
That's it. There you go. We're all little weebs in some form. If we watch Toonami, I think as soon as you watch Toonami, you're officially in weeb territory, or at least you're officially a weeb. Because that, for me and a lot of other people, especially here in the United States, that was our first real exposure to anime. Even though there was those people that traded tapes and all this other stuff back in the, I guess you could say, late 80s, early 90s, etc., where that was like that part of that culture and stuff. But that's where really I got my exposure to it, because again, I started off with DBZ, I started off with Gundam Wing, I even started off with Rurouni Kenshin, Yu Hakusho, a lot of different shows like that, and again, it branched off to other stuff. I mean, for you, you've been watching anime for years, correct? Like a long time. Like, what was your first show? What was your first show?
My first show was Sailor Moon, and it wasn't when it was on the Cartoon Network block. It was when it was on Fox Kids or something that, when they had Sailor Says series that would happen in between episodes or in between commercial breaks, where you had somebody come out and Sailor Moon cosplay and be like, Sailor Says. And that was my first anime, and I used to go to Blockbuster and I would rent the Sailor Moon movie over and over again, because they only had the Sailor Moon R movie. And when they got the Sailor Moon S movie, I was super excited, because then I rented both of those back to back all the time. But from there, I am very much I am 29, so I am right smack dab in the middle of the Toonami generation, just like you said. So Cardcaptor Sakura, Tenchi Muyo,
a lot of shows.
All the ones you mentioned, and then the Adult Swim stuff like Inuyasha, Big O, Cowboy Bebop, Ghost in the Shell, Witch Hunter Robin was my jam.
All these shows, I watched all of them, man. They were so good.
Which is what I really like about talking to anime within my generation, because we all have this collective memory of Cartoon Network and Adult Swim.
Yeah.
And all of those shows really influenced kind of our tastes and where we go. And then obviously we changed, I started reading manga scans and stuff. I don't do that anymore, but back then that was the only way you could get them. Same thing with fan subs and fan dubs of movies and everything. So I dabbled a little bit in that, but by the time I was really, really into anime, we had already started getting so much content through Cartoon Network that that formed me.
I agree. And again, I can relate, because I'm almost the same thing. Even though I'm a little bit older than you, I'm 32, or just hit 32 recently. But I was still within that same generation that did watch that stuff, or at least was exposed to it in that way. And again, same thing even with, the Toonami, Adult Swim, the Midnight Run, a lot of those shows, a lot of those blocks that really, and again, I even remember when Toonami went offline, and then when it came back during that April Fool's thing, just randomly like that. Those are things that we could all relate with, especially watching those shows. Yeah, that was even before with me going to conventions. Before going to the convention scene down here, again, there's a big convention scene in Florida, South Florida specifically. But before I even got into that type of stuff, I was watching a lot of shows, all the shows you mentioned there. I would even say I started getting into the Tokyo Pop stuff at some point. After I want to say a couple years that I was already living here, where I started going to the library and I started checking out manga there. I started reading Great Teacher Onizuka. I started reading a lot of the Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, Love Hina, a lot of different stuff all over the place. And again, transitioning into watching those shows, the ones that had anime adaptations anyway and stuff. There was a lot of things.
I did the whole, I'm going to go sit in Barnes and Noble for 2 hours and just read the manga shelf.
Everybody did that. And I don't care who says it. Everybody did that because one, we were broke, and two, because they had more like stuff to actually, peruse through, for the most part.
And to be honest, I think one of the best things, not one of the best things, but one of the things that made me realize how large Toonami's impact and anime's impact in the West was with the Toonami generation was my husband. He's 32, 33, 32.
He's one of his age.
His birthday's in September. I know that, but I believe he's 32. Yeah, he's 32. Okay. I'm bad with ages. Quarantine, like, time doesn't matter or exist. I know he's 4 years older than me. So yeah, he's turning 33 this year. There we go. Anyway, he hates anime. Well, I guess he doesn't hate anime. He's just like, I don't care about this stuff. Why are you watching that? And then he's had the very bad luck of walking into my office while I'm watching, like, he walked in while I was watching Food Wars, and he also walked in while I was watching Prime Movie, and he was like, nope, I'm just leaving. I don't know what this is.
Hard nope on that.
Also walked in while I was watching that, so he noped out. But we did a hard nope. But we did a Dragon Ball Z. We've actually done 2 Dragon Ball Z episodes on our podcast, But Why Though, which is our pop culture podcast. And my husband's like, I don't watch it. I didn't watch it, but I know everything that you guys are talking about. I know what characters you all are talking about. I know, Kamehameha. Yeah. Like, he still had those pop culture memories because of what was around him, which I think really speaks to the power of what anime on that platform did. Even people who are uninterested still know.
That's a big deal because it's funny too, especially years later and even up to now at this point, a lot of people, especially a lot of purists, purist fans, or I would even call them gatekeepers to an extent, that really dump on Toonami, and they say it's like, oh, well, you probably weren't a real fan because you weren't watching stuff on This Way or watching these type of shows.
Yeah.
We were doing just dubs instead of subs. It's a very weird thing, but a lot of people, not just us, but just in general, really got their first taste of what that medium can be. And then, as a gateway to some of these other stuff, because I would have never discovered Miyazaki films if it wasn't for Toonami. And I love Miyazaki films. Miyazaki films are some of the best animation style films like out there, right next to Disney, or even in some cases I would even argue can surpass Disney with their storytelling, with their visuals. There's a lot of stuff like that, but my point is that even not watching stuff like that on the regular, it was still part of the zeitgeist, because look at the impact of Dragon Ball, and Dragon Ball's an old show in general.
Yep.
Dragon Ball Z, I would even argue GT, because I'm not a huge fan of GT, but like that entire run of stuff done by Akira Toriyama, that had a huge impact on people, especially on people of all types of communities, which I think is interesting. A lot of people don't touch on that, where a lot of people, not just the minority community, but people who are Caucasians and people in other countries, really resonate with that show and find a lot of common ground amongst people, which is really cool.
Yeah, and it's one of the things too. It's always been weird for me. So when I grew up, anime, like, obviously, like, it wasn't like the popular thing to like, but the people who liked anime in my group were all brown and black folks. Like, we all loved and gravitated towards anime. It didn't mean that there weren't any, white folks who liked it, because there definitely were. Yeah. But like, we had an extremely diverse community of anime fans, and it wasn't until I got older and I started going to like conventions or like stuff like that, and I was like, oh wait, this space, like a lot of like, or honestly online, like how people act online, I'm like, oh, why is this a thing? I thought anime was just automatically diverse, and I think it really is. And I think a lot of the time when people kind of like pigeonhole the anime community into like being really racist or like all these other things, it's because they're only looking at those subsection of like fans who are also the gatekeepers most of the time that are that way, but they're missing out on like this giant diverse array of fans that is the community. And I think for me, like, anime has always been a home because it was different. And it was something.
The other thing too we should also mention is that a lot of those people that do say stuff like that is because they don't know, and I don't think that they've explored a lot of stuff. I don't even think they've watched, because I mean, like I said, I think specifically Dragon Ball Z is the show that really got everybody on common ground, then gatewayed to other shows, because even though there's a lot of different fandoms and a lot of different people of all types and all types of fandoms within subsets of anime, I still feel like all those people, even if you're not into DBZ like that, you still kind of got into it through DBZ. Here in the States specifically here in the States, because I know in other countries it might be different, but like, from my experience, that's what I've seen.
And my God, in America, like, one of the largest things was like, I have a couple of friends who didn't know who had never heard the English voice actors or the Japanese voice actors for DBZ because they only watched the Spanish dubs. Like, Spanish dubs were huge.
That's true.
Like, Telemundo had an entire block of anime that they would play. So, like, that's one of the really cool things is, like, especially with DBZ, because DBZ was, like, the anime that came to the West. It hit, and they put it everywhere and across every country they could and every language they could. And so it became this uniting force, a uniting factor. And there are ways that we consumed it that, like, I don't buy into the sub versus dub debate because my thing is I like it however I watched it first because that's what my brain wants it to be.
Yeah, right.
And so sometimes it's a sub, sometimes it's a dub. And that's, like, I have friends who still seek out Spanish dubs of things just because they're like, yeah, no, that it's just a really cool experience for me to watch this anime in Spanish and stuff like that.
So let me ask you this, because I think this is a good way to transition into this, where I know a lot of people look at anime as a lot more of a mature style of, like, animation or cartoons, quote unquote. And I think that it's very unique to anime where you got exposed to, like, more mature subject matter. Like, over, because, like, granted, there's been other types of animations out there, like Fire and Ice, like The Hobbit, and other stuff that's animation that does deal with mature themes. But I think, like, that adolescence, like, generation, especially our generation, got exposed to a lot of that stuff through these shows. Like, for me, I you know, probably offhand, like, off the top of my head, I would say, like, maybe Cowboy Bebop, Outlaw Star, and Yu Yu Hakusho. And I would even argue Rurouni Kenshin really started getting into stuff like that, where there was, you know, themes of death, themes of romance, or mature romance.
You can even go into shoujo when you look at, like, Revolutionary Girl Utena. Like, that's one of the, or even Sailor Moon to an extent too. Like, I mean, granted, Sailor Moon to in a different extent because we got it censored a lot. But when you look at something like Revolutionary Girl Utena, you're looking at something that you're literally looking at a story of a young girl learning how to break a system. And not only that, you're watching a very queer story, and it's something that you get in anime. And it's not necessarily, how do I say it? For me, anime is more able to handle deeper themes, bigger themes, because in Japan, animation is an art form. Yeah. And that art form can tackle anything. Whereas in the US, and in the West in general, we tend to have this assumption that if it's animated, it's for kids. So it has to be a kid thing. Versus, like, when anime came over, it was like, oh, this is just a whole nother level of storytelling where I can get everything from family. Like, right now, you can get everything from family-friendly yokai watch to, like, Snow White with the red hair, to Ninja Scroll, to Plunder. Like, just looking at, like, Funimation stuff. And there's so much out there, and it's because the way animation is consumed and made in Japan. And even, I mean, there's always been adult comic books, but now it's more accepted to have comic books that are telling stories that aren't necessarily put onto superheroes and stuff like that. And it's just an understanding that an artistic medium can do more than just be something for kids. And I think we're finally starting to break that barrier. And that's, like, COVID has done a lot of bad, but one of the good things COVID has done, which sounds really weird to say. Yeah, right. I have a lack of a better phrase here. Yeah. One of the good side effects has been that there's been a lot more investment into adult animation because they can't bring people onto sets now. Yeah. So there is like Comedy Central's launching a whole bunch of new adult animations. Netflix has already been investing in adult animation, which has been phenomenal on their, like, Sesmano's Castlevania, Cannon Busters, like things that are in that anime vein, but have, like, come to also, like, that have come out of the West. And we're getting to a point where we're starting to accept animation and anime as something that isn't just for kids now, and it's so beautiful to watch.
So I've been waiting. It's funny you mention this stuff, and I think going back to the thing that you mentioned about queer subject matter with Revolutionary Girl Utena, you know, for someone that's like me, again, because I'm not queer, I'm not LGBTQ, but that was my first exposure to those type of subject matters was through anime. Not that show specifically. There's been, like, other shows here, and I would think, like, Sailor Moon for me was the one that kind of, like, really kind of geared that, even though the English dub changed it up, but, like, the original dub was really where the story was.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing about it, though, that the reason why that's relevant is because I've always felt that anime shows in general, not movies, TV shows, etc., OAVs or whatever, OVAs, whatever. They've always handled those types of subject matters with an element of reverence. And because I've always felt that Western shows or American shows or other shows that are outside of that genre, or outside that medium, have always struggled to try to present those types of like topics and subject matter or perspectives and arguments without either one being obnoxious about it, talking down to an audience, or two or three making fun of it. And I found that weird because there's very few shows that I could think of, with maybe the exception of like Avatar: The Last Airbender, that gets into like stuff that was made like outside Japan, that really covers subject matters where it's again, it's not talking down to the kids or it's not talking down to the audience. It's like showing them these things and like explaining them, and also letting people be okay with questioning and just like being insightful about it. And I think that's what really benefited a lot of different communities. Again, the LGBTQ community, I think big time, because there's a lot of shows that are LGBTQ friendly or deal with that type of subject matter that you wouldn't even think about it or even realize it on first glance, but it actually gets into that stuff, and it handles it really well, and it actually tells really good stories.
Yeah, and it's because they're handling them like that. Their stories, their dynamic, their narratives. Like Given is probably so Given is a yaoi manga, and anime show that probably has one of the most beautiful and reverent stories about grief and how people grieve that I've ever seen in anything, any sort of animation. So it's my favorite manga, regardless of genre. But I think the fact that that anime and manga have yaoi and yuri subsets. So yuri is women, is girl love.
Yes, female
yeah,
love.
female love, and then you have boy love, which is yaoi, and those are kind of like how like fans talk about them. And so what those two subjects do is essentially, and Tokyo Pop currently actually has an entire line called Love X Love, and it's just yaoi and yuri titles. And it's handling it as a bigger story that isn't doing anything to like fetishize it or tokenize it or that kind of stuff. And in the West, a lot of the times you just get like, we're only now starting to see shows like Steven Universe or Korra, or like, you know, and Korra already happened, but like even Korra was handled not necessarily the best way.
Yeah, I agree. I think with Korra specifically, that was the thing with Korra specifically, because I actually like Korra, and again, I love Avatar in general, but Korra, I felt like it kind of came a little bit out of left field, and it was handled almost in a rush job towards the end, as opposed to like how things were handled back in Last Airbender, where I think there was an element of time that was allowed more. I felt like.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree. But I think now we're starting to get a new wave of animation, where you're starting to see they're human stories, and that's it. And that's why a lot of the time that it succeeds in anime and manga. And this isn't to say that it's perfect. Like there are definitely stereotypes and stuff like that happen a lot of the time in shonen. Like shonen's usually the biggest perpetrator of both stereotypes for women and LGBT community. But at the same time, like there is so much other content there that is
other genres.
Exactly, where you get actually fulfilled stories. And I think that that's something beautiful that anime does. And I think that also just naturally comes from having like the gaming component that's into it, especially because like when I think of anime games, I think of fighters and I think of visual novels.
And JRPGs for me.
And JRPGs. And visual novels a lot of the time are dating sims. So like, I mean, and it's one of these weird things, or like not weird things, but one of these cool things is you have dating sims that come out and they can then spawn off an entire manga, like Clannad. Clannad is a beautiful anime. It was also a dating sim game before it was an anime. Like anime most of the times is based on one of two things, a manga or a visual novel. That's usually how it goes. And so I think it just opens up a whole nother possibility, because I think a lot of animation too, like even to the point of like same-sex romances, it's just anime and manga just handle romance differently than how we handle it a lot of the times.
I agree. I think that just in general, not even just romance, but like a lot of different subject matters, especially slice of life stuff. I feel like anime as a medium is a little bit much more open to ideas being explored, or at least ideas being interpreted or presented in different ways compared to Western philosophies, a lot of Western animation, a lot of Western games even, because we'll probably get in the EX, we'll talk a little bit more about game stuff, but like sticking with this, because this is good. I feel like just the Japanese in general, again, with the way that they approach stuff, they're a little bit much more open-minded. It's part of their culture that seems to be a little bit more accepting of a lot of different things as opposed to other places out there. Let me ask you this as a good way to kind of wrap everything up. Do you feel like, you know, now that obviously, you know, between stuff with the pandemic, between stuff like over time, not as we're moving to different console generations and like movies and TV is changing with streaming services and stuff, do you feel like a lot more Western / any place outside of like Japan is going to adopt a lot of the stuff that we've seen in things like anime and like the way, all the stuff that we've been talking about now? Do you feel like that's going to really bleed or diffuse into a lot of our other types of media? Like in the way where now you're going to start seeing a lot more of that stuff, more so than what we've been seeing lately?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be one of two things. I think you're going to see studios like Powerhouse Animations, which works with Furterator, to do like Castlevania.
They're going to do Devil May Cry too, right?
Yeah, and so it's one of these things where they come and they bring out these animations that shows that like you can have adult animation. And I think that a lot of the time, like the big barrier is what is animation, what can animation do? And I think now, because there's been this push, I think we are going to see a lot more adult animations out of the US that isn't just Rick and Morty or Family Guy, because like the comedy has always been there, like those like shock jock comedy animations, yeah, that's always been there. But I think now we're actually going to see an impetus to make well-crafted stories. But that being said, I also think because of the pandemic, because of where everything is, I think that more companies are going to be investing in Japanese companies and trying to get more licenses. Because if you look at the state of streaming licenses right now for Japanese releases, you have Crunchyroll, Funimation, Hulu, and Hulu gets a lot of the crossover from Funimation, and then you have Netflix, and Netflix is already throwing money behind a lot of its own originals. So Netflix originals in the US a lot of the times are coming from Fiji TV in Japan, so they'll work with them, get the license, and then drop it here in the US. And so we're seeing a big blossoming of anime content get picked up, and then you're also seeing what used to be so Crunchyroll actually is a beautiful story, because Crunchyroll was essentially a pirating site initially when it first started in 2006, and now it is literally coming up with its own animations. Like they have a deal with Webtoon, so they've been doing that, but then you also have like the Crunchyroll originals that are coming out, like Onyx Equinox, which is literally an anime based on Aztec mythology. Like that's going to be really cool. And so I think we're going to get a lot more of this, but it's going to happen in two ways. You're going to have Americans kind of finding their feet when it comes to like what type of content's going to work, what type of content they're going to put out, how far away are they going to go from the Rick and Mortys of the world to like, this is animation that can be a drama, can be an action, all those things. And then you're going to have companies putting more and more money into acquiring Japanese licenses, because you're even seeing that when it comes to manga. So like Mangamo just came out, and Mangamo is a manga reading service essentially, and they have
kind of like Comixology a little bit.
Yeah, kind of like Comixology, but just manga. And then Isneo also has manga stuff, and Comixology is expanding its manga stuff. And you have people like Kodansha, which is one of the like 4 big publishers in manga in the US, and they're doing all of these deals with them. And I think it's just that we're spending more time indoors, and there's just a push and a want for more of
there's a need there,
more good stories. Yeah.
That's
and
good.
People are going to get them in anime and manga, and it's already been around for so long. Like I think people are just going to get wise, or companies are getting wise to that, because the US ain't opening up anytime soon.
Yeah, right.
Or it's open, quote unquote, but it's not safe. So it's a lot easier to go buy licenses from other companies.
Well, I mean, there's money to be made there for them, and I think that right now that's just the need. That's just the environment right now where we live in, and I think you're right. I think it's going to be pretty interesting, you know, as things move forward, especially into next year and the following year. I feel like we're going to see even more surprises and more like little things like that pop up. But anyway, Kate, thank you so much for chatting with me about this stuff about anime. There's like so much more we could dive into that. There's just never enough time. I mean, we're going to talk more on EX Mode about more like gaming specific stuff with anime and cartoons and stuff, but tell everybody right now, where can everybody find you? Because you're on the socials. You got a bunch of places you can be found.
Yeah, so you can find me on pretty much all the social media platforms. So I'm most active at OhMyMithrander, OhMyMithr. Randir. Okay, that's hard to spell out.
You did it. I was looking at it. I was making sure she spelled her name right for the record.
But yes, you can find me on at Omen with Randir. If you want to follow our community of podcasters and writers, you can head on over to at ButWhyThoughPC, ButWhyThoughPC. That we have news, reviews, interviews on gaming, movies, TV, film, manga, anime, comic books, and pretty much anything else that is under the pop culture sun. So come check me out. Come check us out. We're always open. We do community nights every weekend where we get together and watch movies. And we have anime day on Sundays. Cool. And this Sunday we're watching season 3 of Haikyuu.
Okay, there you go. Nice. There you go. And then go send her a bunch of owl hooks, just because we send people owl hooks out here, because we got a thing with owls in this show. But anyway, thank you so much for chatting up with me about this stuff. Guys, if you enjoyed this episode, let me know in the comment section down below. Leave a like on this video. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I just hit 2K subscribers recently within the last few days. So please, we're all still going up on our way towards the goal of 10K. Show some love, spread word about the channel and stuff. We're going to talk more on EX mode, so definitely make sure that you guys are subscribed over to the Patreon as well. Remember, dollar level or higher, you're going to get all this exclusive content, including what we're going to do right now. With that being said, we will talk to you guys again very soon. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.